Did you get a haircut?
A while ago, yeah. Did it myself.
Oh, good job. That's
Thank
good.
you.
Yeah, I say good job too. I just don't know what we're talking about. What's the topic?
My haircut.
Oh, like wave or something in front of the camera so you become big.
My what?
Like make oh there it is. Oh, you look good. You always look good. I don't know. I can't tell the difference. It looks really good though.
I see you're growing out a beard, Courtney.
Not on purpose. Yeah, there's to me a beard is only it's evidence that an accident has been happening for a long time. That is the definition of the beard. A chronic accident. So I will try to remove it maybe this weekend. It's Friday. I don't think we'll go the whole time today. We'll go long on Monday, but I don't think we'll go the whole time today. How is everybody?
All right. Can't complain.
Oh, let me open up the chat. Alive. Okay, Genevieve's alive. Alive enough to type, at least. Kendall is also. And Alexis, we're all alive enough to type. Me too. All right, let me find my lectures. Can we see? The silence is confirmation. All right. I don't think that would work for if you're like an attorney and somebody's, it's a consent case. Silence. I don't think that's how it works. But for the class, so physical activity as a source of stress, we're going to get into a little bit of what overtraining looks like, overreaching, functional. That would sound like radio in a submarine. So we're going to get a little bit to functional overreaching, non-functional overreaching, overtraining syndrome, what those look like. Mostly it's a hormonal thing. So we'll talk a tiny bit about hormones and the hypothalamus as its regulatory center. And what gets unregulated, we see some problems. And that happens with excesses of physical activity. You know this stuff and you know that stuff. And these people at the end today, I'll talk about these two. As we get into overtraining, we can almost present a defense for Selye from the perspective of overtraining, general adaptation syndrome and overtraining. Almost there's a defensible case, but of course, we follow up with Adolf. You know this exercise is good for us because it harms us, it's bad for us, it puts us, we have to defend against these threats. And if we can't defend against them, if we can't defend against those threats and they accumulate and they accumulate and they get the best of us, right? The better of us for a while and the best of us eventually, that's overtraining syndrome. That's insufficient recovery. That is your physiology throws in the towel and you just don't keep fighting. So that's overtraining syndrome. And you know all of this stuff. If you don't know it, I trust that you'll speak up from a radio and a submarine. And there's just the types of proteins that are going to be relaying this message and the reason they're relaying that message. Now, this is going to be a theme today. We're going to have this theme of the amount of stress that we endure. And again, there's allostatic load, the summation of stresses. There are tons of sources of stresses. All life is a stressor, and there's just different versions come at you every moment of your life. You're going to have 20 different stressors attacking you. This morning I was freezing. I put on a sweatshirt and now I'm sweating because suddenly it got sunny. It became California again outside. And this is a form, this is sort of an acute form of overtraining. Now, again, overtraining syndrome is a very specific thing, but if you overexert yourself at a very local level, you do see disruption of tissues. If you overexert yourself on a very chronic systemic level, you see disruption of a lot of things. And I don't know which one's more chronic. It sort of depends. I mean, if you like rip your arm off, maybe that's more chronic. But the 6 little take-home points from all of that. Um, we develop according to our stressors, right? We're just a collection of dorsal fins, and no matter how we load tissues, if you're doing this or you're doing the splits or you're jogging and there's 500 heel strikes, that's not very many, and there's 20,000 heel strikes, that's also not that many, but you get the idea. These summations of stress that eventually work their way into our tissues. Now, at the end of yesterday, somewhere in the middle end of yesterday, I put up this slide and said, you want to perform those 2 miles in 16 minutes, right? There's the 8-minute miles that you want to do, 2 of them in a row for a Army test. How do you do it? Well, let's do the task analysis. Let's figure out what we need to do. What are these stressors our bodies have to endure? There's pace, right? Figure out how many miles an hour that is and train for as long as you can, as far as you can. That's the same thing in this case at a particular pace. Train for the distance. You have to run 2 miles, so run 2.1 or something. If something goes awry, you don't want to go awry and have you, well, I'm only conditioned to run exactly 2 miles. The conditions weren't perfect, and so I ran 1.9. That doesn't qualify you for the Army. So maybe train, half a mile an hour too fast, 0.1 miles an hour too long, and cut the timing. But run for 16 minutes. So it's the time, it's the distance, and it's the speed. Those are the 3 stressors. And I mentioned that there's evidence that the speed of contraction, the speed of running is of great importance. And this is from 2006. And you improve your speed according to the speed you're training at, right? So you might get better, and looking at things like resistance training and power. If you're training at a higher velocity, you might be able to increase the power output, the strength, the total force output at lower speeds. But if you train slow, you get worse at doing fast stuff. Your performance can deteriorate doing fast things. And what I'm not saying is, well, you should always train fast because that's also going to help slow. Not really, because when you start looking at the metabolism of things, you're going to compromise the slow stuff. But in a particular study design, you will see compromise of the higher velocity actions when performing lower velocity motions. And this is not a new concept, right? This is from 1970, this one. And they're looking at essentially the same findings, where if you want to improve some particular speed, train at that speed, right? Train at that speed. And on this one, at the bottom, back to 06, at the bottom, on the other hand, it appears that isokinetic training also causes an increase in strength power above and below the training velocity, although they diminish as the testing velocity deviates from the velocity of training. So if you think about angular specificity, we talked about that and how if you do isometric activations, isometric muscle actions, you get strength improvement, performance improvement at that angle. But there's diminishing returns every degree you go away from that, right? So if you're exercising at 90, 85 and 95 degrees, not as good. Yeah, you can tell that you've been exercising. You can tell that you've been doing isometric training. You're better. Go to 90 or go to 10 degrees away. So you go down to 80 and 100 degrees. It's even worse, right? Go 15 degrees away, and I don't know, maybe you can tell that you were exercising, maybe, right? It's the same thing here with velocity of contraction. So if you're running 6-minute miles, if you're running 7-minute miles, if you're running 8-minute miles, if you're running 10-minute miles, that's a different speed of contraction, velocity of that muscle contraction. and you're going to adapt to that specific contraction. And as you depart from it, if you train at 8 minute miles, as you get away from that velocity of contraction, you're going to start losing capacity. So that's one of these major stressors that you're going to see. And it's not that novel, right? It's this, I mean, we're going back to Thomas Delorme, 1945, specificity of adaptation in a weight room. You see the same specificity everywhere, though. You see it on a track, you see it with motor coordination, you see it with environmental adaptations, you even see it in things like hearing, right? So there's all of the senses, all of your senses also respond to specificity. There's some particular tone or some particular scent or some, we talked about this a little bit with sensitization and habituation, but everything specificity, right? You want to train cognition. Okay, what kinds of cognition are we doing? Um, uh, Trivia, trying to memorize a ton of things? Is it short-term recollection? You're flipping over cards and trying to do matching pairs? Are you doing, what type of cognitive activity are you doing? Train accordingly. Specificity of adaptation. And the reason there's a 1990 shoe down there, Andre Agassi. Remember, he hired Gil Reyes to be his trainer, and he's like, "Why are you jogging for tennis?" I mean, he didn't call it foolish, but he said it in other words. This seems foolish, he said in kinder words. 5 miles. Maybe over the course of an entire day of training, you do 5 miles in 3 5-step motions. Again, Ross and Liam, you'll know answers that I don't know here. But remember, there is a such thing as too far, or if not too far, at least inappropriate applications or inappropriate understanding of specificity. And so it was that Iowa strength coach, but he's just that's just a representative speech, an off-the-cuff answer that is a common one. So I'm not making fun of this person. I am illustrating a position in strength training, a position in athletics, that is maybe not considering some of the details here, that human beings are not in the shape of dumbbells. Human beings are not balanced and in the shape of a barbell or selectorized, with the pin in it equipment. And so some of this is just going to be using the tissue, activating high threshold motor units, those bigger, stronger, faster ones that don't want to give in. They take more excitatory stimulus, more arousal for them to leave slumber and contribute to the cause. It just takes this big excitatory stimulus to hit the high threshold stuff. And so you can do that in the weight room. You can't always do that in training, and it's really helpful if you can train those muscles to be more responsive and be more remodel those muscle fiber types. Very easy to do in a weight room. It can be harder to do in your sports setting. And so the weight room is a place where you enhance the functional capacity of the tissues you are going to be using in a competitive situation. Even if you're just competing with yourself, you're trying to accomplish something better, jump higher, run faster, whatever. And so this concept that, bodies are unpredictable and unbalanced and always on the move, so I better have terrible form in the weight room. You're just going to have an injured team. And Iowa was super successful for a long time, but that predated this. Right, they're incredibly successful streak, probably the most successful. You can look it up. I'm not huge on wrestling, but my understanding is they're the most successful wrestling program. But that was before all of this, right? It wasn't like, oh, we do this and now we're successful. It's like, okay, well, you do that and you just half your team is on the disabled list for life, right, for the season, and then as many agricultural and sort of like annual seasons thereafter. So making sure you have a firm understanding of size principle. This is just one article. There's 1,000 of these that you could find. This is a good one, but there's hundreds. It's at least a 3-digit number of compelling articles about size principle. And just a quick review: tiny muscle fibers, little dark meat. This is your drumstick meat. This is the the duck breast meat over here, bloody and fatty, just greasy meat. And then over here, this is just all engine over here. I mean, there's no oil in it, right? There's no oil in that engine, so it's going to break down. But man, is that thing powerful, right? You need, there's no fat in this muscle. There isn't a bunch of vascular beds. It's just white meat. You need to like put a sauce on it as lubricant so you can even swallow the thing. Otherwise, it gets stuck in your throat. These are the highest threshold motor units over here. Really, really hard to recruit. Down here, right now, you're just sitting there, postural stuff is happening. Maybe you're like cracking your knuckles, or you're looking around, or just, you're not succumbing to gravity so completely that you're on the ground. You're using these guys and gals and whatevers. I don't know what a sex or gender assignment of muscle fibers it would be, but as the load and demand need, however that need is presented, that need could be presented by a 15 RM, a 15 rep max set. That could be your need, right? You get to that 15th rep and you're just like shaking and it's not moving anywhere. Okay, you're using this stuff up here, even if the weight is a little bit lighter. Do a 3 RM. You get to that first rep and it's a little bit hard to get up here, and then by the second rep you're using all of this stuff. It takes a little bit of time to ascend the Henneman's ladder, these motor neurons. It takes a little time to climb up into this upper threshold region. And so the first rep on something, let's say you're doing 10 RM, that first rep is as hard as the 9th, right? The 10th rep is the hardest. The first and 9th reps are the second hardest. Reps 2 through 8 are the easy ones, where you're sort of using these and they haven't checked out yet, and then these things start periodically checking out, and then you're down here trying to do the 10th rep with these things and they're not strong enough to do it. So size principle, or orderly recruitment, it was called in the 30s. Size principle was coined in the 50s. Now, coming back to this idea of the amount of stress. Over here, when we had Arnold Schwarzenegger in late 70s and mid 70s, and I think 1980, I think was the last time he competed. Okay, let's say there's a standard amount of stress that Arnold is experiencing, however many calories and emotional things and pounds hoisted, 1 million pounds hoisted, whatever, some standard, exactly equivalent amount of stress. Now, maybe in the middle of his life, he would have been over here. Guy's like 70 years old or something. So in the middle of his life, maybe that amount of stress would be here. In his competitive youth, that amount of stress, he's atrophying with that amount of stress. Later in his life, he's like a 70-year-old. That amount of stress is too much. That could harm him. That could be difficult for his endocrine system and his muscles and tendons and joints and cardiovascular system, all of his kidneys, it could be hard on. A standard amount of stress that might have been very healthful for him at age 40 might have been too little when he's in his 20s and too much when he's in the 70s. So this isn't the same for everybody. We all fall somewhere on this spectrum. And if you're a beginner, if you're very advanced, if you're an Olympic athlete, if you're a normal person, if you're a college student, there's going to be a different starting point. And it's important to know that whenever you're working with people, know what their starting point is, know how much is too much. Overreaching for you might take an awful lot of activity. There's, okay, I have to work out, I have to do weights 6 days a week to reach overtraining in a period of time. But a beginner, it may be like 3 days a week and they're just plummeting in their capacity. So, or there's a risk of adverse events, strokes and heart attacks, things like that. Some embolus gets lodged, whatever, somewhere. And so a PAR-Q, everyone who's an athlete, most of you are athletes now or have an athletic history, sports teams, and it's, the park cue, like, does your chest hurt and should you never work out ever again? Yes, right. This is like serious. Did you pass out while actually? So this is sort of an extreme thing. When you look at the ACSM guidelines, there's a bunch of things like this. This is the 9th edition. It's a cleaner, it's sort of a tidier table. The 10th edition has one too. But there's a bunch of specific risk factors that they say, what's your age, what is your BMI or your waist circumference, what is your blood pressure, what do your lipids look like? And a lot of people have no idea what most of these things are. They can report their family history, they can report their age. In most countries, people can report their age. When I go to Uganda, yes, and their age, I'm like, I don't know, I'm 52, 55, something like that. I mean, people don't really know their exact age. Some people do, but not everybody. People know if they smoke, and people are a little bit, they overestimate their activity. Put a Fitbit on somebody who's like, yeah, I get a decent amount of activity. 2,000, huh? 2,000 steps, right? You got out of bed at 8 a.m. You eventually got into bed at night, and you got 2,100. This is, a lot of people are more sedentary than they think. And obesity, people know this though. Just step on a scale. Hypertension, people might not know. I mean, you can get a Omron blood pressure cuff for $35 on Amazon, and you know exactly. I mean, everyone should know what their blood pressure is. It's a super easy thing to do. You just put a cuff on, push a button, and sit there with your arm resting at sort of like palm up, and sort of you're not like crunched in, whatever. It's at like heart level, resting on a table. Your feet are flat on the ground. You're sitting sort of upright, and you're relaxed, and you're not panicking and whatever. It's super easy to get your blood pressure. Dyslipidemia, yeah, you need a lab for that. Like, we can do it in our lab, but most people have no idea what their cholesterol is, and most people have no idea what their blood sugar is. Blood sugar is cheaper to test. I mean, you can just go get I'm sure I have one lying around in the kitchen somewhere. I do, but it's out of reach. A ketone and blood glucose monitor, and you just prick your finger, and it's like $1 a strip or something, 80 cents a strip for the glucose. It's more expensive, super expensive for these ones, and in the middle for the ketone strips, like $2 each or something. And so we know what the risk factors are, and if people have signs or symptoms of pulmonary or cardiovascular disease, there's COPD on board, there's vascular disease, something like that. They're high risk, and just consider anything above walking to be, this is a risk. I'm not going to do anything with you. But if they don't have some sign or symptom disease, and they just have, one or no risk factors, who cares? Do whatever you want. They're low risk. Now, we're going to talk about what it looks like with overtraining. You begin with overreaching and you arrive in overtraining, and athletes are the ones who are getting into that level. You're not usually seeing the 53-year-old who, I don't know, works for, Pacific somewhere, whatever, doing that person is never in overreaching or overtraining. They're just at risk of this stuff. They're at risk more of adverse events. But it's youth and people in this moderate and low risk, mostly in the low risk, who are at risk of overtraining. So this is just sort of CVD, cardiovascular disease risk factors. And for the sake, if you're ever working with people, and it's not athletes, you should do this a little bit with athletes, but mostly looking for high risk. Do you have diabetes, asthma? Do you have any? Just go through like the metabolic syndrome stuff. Do you have a bunch of things? And if they do, don't work with them. See, I'm going to send you over to somebody else, and I'm going to warn that other person that you're like, you have a down payment on a coffin already, right? You have to be cautious, really cautious with these people. Now, this is just examples of case studies. If you feel like doing these, I'll post it. If you feel like doing the case studies and figuring out, this is a 54-year-old person. The first one was a 21-year-old. But this just tells you what their digits are. 44-year-old male, and then this one's a 36-year-old female, and you can just figure out, you go through this and figure out how many risk factors they have, and then if they're low, moderate, or high risk. And so here's all 4 of them, and here's the answers to it. So it's a very, especially if you're going to be working with adults who are late life adults, not people who are athletes or people who are youth, classically considered youth, but you're working with older adults. You got to do this thing, otherwise you're at risk of killing people. But now that's a different type of stressor, right? So it's an acute overload. Okay, this is not, micro trauma to all of your, tissues, right? This is a macro event. But how you classify people and sort of what you recommend, what you prescribe as a healthcare practitioner. This is how you would recommend exercise to people. But everyone here is young, right? Not me, but all of you are young, and you are not at risk. I suspect nobody is at risk of having an adverse event. What you're at risk of is overdoing it on the track, overdoing it on the field, overdoing it in the lap pool, overdoing wherever you're exercising, whatever court you're on. Um, that's where people are overdoing it, and overdoing it in the weight room. Tons of literature on this. I like the little diagrams that this one had, where what happens is you do this big training session and then you deplete yourself. Takes a little time to recover. Takes a little time to recover. And if you don't recover fully before you train again and redeplete yourself, you're going to experience this gradual decline, gradual decline, gradual decline. And usually it's very gradual. The easiest way to tell is if you are, whether you're recovering sufficiently. The easiest way to tell is, are you performing optimally? Is your time or your velocity or your load that you're lifting, if you're running, and what is your, what are your intervals? If you're swimming, what are your intervals? If you are jumping, how high are you getting? If you're lifting, how much load is there? Did you get the same number of reps that you got last week, or ideally more? If you're serving, right? If you're a tennis player and you're serving, how fast is that ball going? All of these things are indicators of training distress. When you start to see compromised performance, what that means is you have this depletion and then recovery, 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 recovery. You should be able to get even better. And then you exercise again, deplete, and you should be able to get even better and exercise again and deplete. You should be able to recover more than you were originally. If you don't, if you exercise and then you deplete and then you're trying to get back and you exercise again and you haven't recovered, then you exercise again, you don't give yourself sufficient time or rest or nutrition to recover, and then you exercise again, and inadequate rest, or nutrition or sleep or something, and then you exercise again. You need to recover between sets, right? There needs to be a between, not between sets acutely, but between sessions of exercise. And lots of things are going to matter. There's going to be a lot of variables that are going to affect this. Genetics is one. Some people are genetically equipped to do, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday or something. You do these 5 days a week. Let's say it's on a tennis court. 5 days a week on the tennis court. Some people genetically they can handle it. Some people are, 3 days a week on the tennis court. There's a genetic difference. There's an age difference, right? Somebody who's 18 years old versus somebody who's 30 years old versus somebody who's 50 years old. There are differences in recovery rate, you will find, as those years go by. You will find yourself needing more and more hours between workouts. Oh, I used to be able to do this 2 days in a row. Now I need a day off in between. Age matters. Consider your age and the age of the people you're working with. If you're working with athletes, consider age. The characteristics of the exercise prescription or of the endeavor, the athletic endeavor, that matters, right? The FIT principle, frequency, intensity, time, type. When you start looking at the intensity and the type of exercise and the duration that you do it, the time, the duration that you do it, when you start looking at these variables, sometimes exercise requires, like, let's say it's all concentric stuff. You can recover pretty well from that. If it's all concentric, you can do that tomorrow. If there's a bunch of eccentric loading, though, you're going to need more time to recover. You can't do that every day. You're going to start breaking down tissue before it is remodeled, and you're going to find yourself having some problems there. The environment in which you exercise, is it hot? Is it at high altitude? These things matter, right? The conditions of exercise. If you're exercising in the heat, you're going to need a prolonged recovery, not just between bursts of activity, between repetitions, or between tennis matches, or whatever. You might need additional days of recovery between these. Sleep is huge. Tons of data, and especially recently in the last 5 years or so, people are really doing a lot of sleep studies on athletic performance. 5-10 years, sleep has become a major topic. And are you getting adequate deep and REM sleep? If you're doing sort of the college student thing of I get up at 5 a.m. for practice, I'm not going to bed at 7 p.m. stuff. If you're living a college life, your performance is way worse than it could be. I mean, we could put steroids on par with sleep, and people go, "Oh, steroids are cheating." Okay, but if all you did was sleep better, that would probably work better than steroids. The anabolic steroids, obviously cortisol, will just kill your performance. But sleep is such a powerful ergogenic aid. I mean, it is up there with the best nutrition you could ever have. It is up there with anabolic steroids. It is up there with resistance training. The perfect program. Sleep is really as good as it gets. So when you start seeing people with compromised sleep, you expect there to be compromised performance, compromised recovery between performances, and eventually this descent into overreaching and overtraining. Nutritional status, right? If you're on a diet, with a lot of it, this is more sort of classical, female athlete triad stuff, where there are body composition interests. That is not just performance. It's not, how much can I lift, and did I win the game? There are also social pressures. I'm not a psychologist, a sports psychologist, anything like that. So I'm not equipped to have the psychological discussion of what kind of precipitates this destructive behavior. But you need adequate nutrition. If you don't have adequate nutrition, your that delay between cessation of performance and preparation for the next one, the delay between readiness to perform again and the time you stop performing the last one, is prolonged. And if you don't honor that with prolonging your rest period, you're going to find yourself in a overtraining syndrome. Hydration is another one. We did Genevieve, Lexi, I don't know who else was involved. But we did an analysis on hydration of collegiate athletes and comparing them to CrossFitters. So CrossFit exercisers, sort of across the lifespan and collegiate aged, and the college athletes aren't as hydrated as we would like to think. We would like to think that there's this very vigilant supervision, coaching, and okay, are you getting your calories in? How are you feeling with your exercise? Do you have any aches and pains we need to talk about? Did you see the athletic trainer? Do you need an ice bath? How's your sleep? How's your hydration? And hydration is fine, but I don't think it is. I think a lot of the athletes are likely, at many universities, many of the athletes are likely in a state of slight dehydration, and that can also affect so that recuperation between exercise. And all of these things, if you compromise the recovery, if you compromise if you optimize recovery, you're going to see less of a chance of dwindling in your performance and finding yourself tumbling into overreaching and overtraining. But if you have poor recovery because you have poor sleep or poor hydration or sustenance, whatever it is you're chewing and swallowing and stuff, if there's some variables in there, or if it's just total allostatic load, right? If it is, I'm coping with a breakup, or I'm coping with, I had a loss of a loved one, or my job is super stressful. All of these are stressors that are going to compromise your performance. And then the other one, the obvious one, prior conditioning. If you have poor prior conditioning and you try to just leap into a difficult training program, a difficult chronic training program, you're not going to be ready. Just like as when we get into heat tolerance, when we get into think football, all of this equipment, these helmets and uniforms and the sweating and I mean, there are just heat exhaustion and heat syncope and heat strokes that we used to see so commonly in football as sweat is compromised, evaporation, dissipation of heat gets compromised. And so what do people do? Well, they try to acclimatize gradually early on, right? There's none of this super long practices in the heat. There's no helmets. There's no, you start becoming accustomed to these stressors gradually until you have better heat tolerance, right? Until you have some actual adaptations that can withstand that heat. Now, when we see, this is from this, it's a good article. I can send it to you if you are interested. But there's the overload principle. And the overload principle is that you start somewhere at a beginning level in everything you do. You start at a beginning level. Something that is going to be difficult for you as a beginner is not going to be difficult for long. So you begin with a beginner's load, a beginner's challenges, a beginner's distances, whatever, a beginner's stresses. But you get used to it, and then you have to increase it. You can't just keep going at that same workload. Otherwise, you adapt to it, and then it's easy. Why would I keep adapting? You know how expensive adaptation is. Adaptation is so expensive. Why would you keep adapting if you can already do it? So your body adjusts and adjusts, takes time. It's not like it's going to adjust in 2 workouts, right? This is going to take some time for it to adapt. But then once it's adapted, it's time to up the stakes, right? It's time to up the load, up the stresses, up some variable, whether it's the load or the number of reps or the distance that you're running or how the speed that you're running or the rest intervals. Let's say you're doing interval training and you're doing, sprint the hundreds and walk the corners. Okay, well, maybe sprint the hundreds and now you're walking a little smaller distance on the corners. You sprint into the corners and start sprinting right before. You can change the intervals, change something. So that's a progressive overload. But you don't just go up, 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 up. You need to take a little break now and again. You need to back off, give your body a chance to recover, right? Just like when people hike up something high, not like you're going to I don't know, El Capitan or whatever it is, Yosemite. Like anyone can just get up Yosemite in one go. But if you're doing Everest or something, you're going up Everest, you're going up, go down and go back to a tent that's a little bit lower so that you can recover. You don't just go up, 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 and then die, right? You go up, 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 down, up, 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 down. And so think stock market, the bull and the bear, right? The bull market goes up, up, up. The bear takes it back down a little bit. The bull market goes up, up, up. The bear market takes it down a little bit. That is how you should be doing your training, where it's not just constantly increasing, no matter what it is. It's swimming, it's tennis, it's weightlifting, it's jogging. Up, 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 down, up, 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 down, up, 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 down. And just like with the stock market, it's much higher than it used to be. I have no idea. It's weird now. The stock market is weird because it's like COVID stuff. But in general, what we see for the stock market is over time, if we do this large picture, is the bull and the bear fighting each other. There's ups and downs with a trend of up. That's what your exercise should be. Now, if it's not, if it's just up, 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 you're going to find yourself going down, 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 by accident. And so that's when you first get into functional overreaching. That's not Oregon or whatever. It's functional overreaching. And it's usually just some days. You know what? It's Tuesday. Go home. Your work sucks. What you're trying to do, you're swimming badly. You're playing tennis poorly. Your weights, I don't know what happened to your bench. Go home, right? We'll come back on Monday. And so that's, it's Tuesday or it's Wednesday. You just say, come back on Monday. That's functional overreaching. And usually, not always, maybe not even most of the time, but a great deal of the time, you're going to come back stronger on Monday than you were on, at your peak. You're going to come back with this peak. So there's sometimes people will employ functional overreaching strategically, where you get to this point where it's just like, you've sort of pushed yourself a little bit too far, and then you go home and just sleep and eat and rest and find your happy place. And then you come back 5 days later, 6 days later, 7 days later, something like that, and you're even better than you were before. That's functional overreaching. Now, if you don't do it right away, if you keep training and you find your performance suffering, you're training and you find your performance getting worse, that's a good early sign that you're in overreaching. But you decide to push through it. You're like, you know what? This is a matter of discipline, or I can just, it's all mental. I can push through this. Whatever it is that the strong-willed folks decide to do, what you're going to start finding after that, you push through it for another week, another 2 weeks, and your performance continues to just taper. You don't just tank, otherwise everybody would know something's wrong. But you find yourself sleeping a little bit more poorly. That's another cue that overreaching is underway. Is to, put on the Fitbit and look at your sleep score, or just notice how much you're rolling over at night and can't fall asleep right away, and you're waking up all the time and poor sleep. And it's not extreme, but it is noticeable, the poor sleep. If let's say you're wearing, a Fitbit or the Whoop or whatever it is, and you can do some sort of heart rate recovery. You're exercising. You stop exercising. All right, your heart rate's 150. Okay, how long does it take to get back to baseline, to your resting heart rate? That starts to get stretched. Your heart rate recovery gets poorer. You start to stretch out that number. That's another sort of clue that you are overtraining. The blood pressure might go up. It doesn't happen in everybody, but often, first thing you roll out of bed in the morning, and you roll out of morning, and your resting heart rate. In some people it can go down, in others it can go up. But usually, resting heart rate, you might see a beat or two different. Now, you're not going to notice if you have no idea what your resting heart rate is. I don't know. It's somewhere between 40 and 90. I don't know. Okay, you're not going to be able to detect early signs of overreaching if you have no idea what these values are, your blood pressure and your heart rate. And the heart rate is a really common one that a lot of people, most of them see an increase. Now, we have something that we submitted this year to ACSM that looked at when to test these things, and what we found was in the morning, fasted morning, heart rate and cardiovascular parameters in the morning. That's when you see it, and in the afternoon and in the evening, sort of dissipated and got back to normal. And so training distress, the overreaching state, not overtraining, but the overreaching state was detectable in the morning, but not detectable later in the day. You might also find a decreased appetite for people who are in this functional overreaching. So it's not just a performance that's suffering. Sometimes there are behaviors other than sleep. Concentration starts to suffer in many people. You'll see their ability to concentrate. They're just like, can I get like some Adderall or something? I just can't do my work. I can't focus. I'm just sort of zoning out. Concentration starts to suffer. Now, as you push it farther and farther, right, into this non-functional overreaching state. So this is very early on. You might see a little bit of heart rate stuff. Some, sleep might get affected. So as you get, farther and farther into I guess further, because you can't really measure overtraining in a kind of a linear distant way. But so you get further and further along into overtraining and closer to that precipice. You're going to start seeing hormonal problems at that point. Overtraining syndrome. Now here, if you're just non-functional overreaching, it might take you a month, right? We're talking a few weeks, or maybe a month, maybe 6 weeks. So it can take time. This just go home this week and I'll see you next week and you're going to be better probably, or at least you'll get back to where you were in a week. This one, to get back to where you were, you got to be careful for 6 weeks, 7 weeks, maybe 8 weeks, something like that. You got to be pretty careful and allow yourself to recover. Over here, I mean, this can be years. This can be life. I mean, this can end careers. Let's say you're a junior in undergrad. You're not, but let's say you're a junior in undergrad and you find yourself in overtraining syndrome. You're probably done with your college career. Probably. Not guaranteed. You might be able to make a comeback. You're probably not going to be as good next year. Your senior year. I bet you won't be as good as you were as a sophomore. Because what you start to encounter is not just basic fatigue, but you get into like adrenal fatigue. Insulin-like growth factor goes down. Testosterone in guys, you see that going down. Glucose regulation problems, that starts to get a little bit, that gets messy. Glucose regulation. Immune function, you get all this excessive cortisol, and you deplete your immune system. Now, it makes sense on an acute level. We're going to talk about cortisol, and when you look at these stress hormones, if you're all stressed out in the moment, what do you need to pay attention to, microscopic threats for? You got macroscopic threats ahead of you, right? There's something really stressing you out, and it's not bacteria. You're not like emotionally and physically exerting yourself and panicking over bacteria, right? There's something big here, and this is a macroscopic thing that's going to come eat you or kill you or whatever. So we have bigger things to worry about than bacteria. So it makes some sense. Now, when you get a big cortisol release, and again, we'll talk about this, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, you're going to see this in tandem. You're going to get epinephrine, norepi, catecholamines. A catecholamine, this is just a thing that's made from tyrosine. Dopamine is a catecholamine too. Tyrosine is a thing you make from phenylalanine. So they're amine hormones made from tyrosine. These are your catecholamines. If you've ever had an equal packet, aspartame, those little blue packets, aspartame, that is phenylalanine and an amino acid and aspartic acid. So if you have phenylketonuria, you can't convert your phenylalanine into tyrosine. And then what problems do you have if you can't get tyrosine? Well, your catecholamines are absent. Tons of problems. If you have phenylketonuria, none of you have it because you would not be in school. You would not have the faculties, the cognitive faculties to be in school. But so when I say catecholamines, what I'm actually talking about is epinephrine and norepinephrine. But dopamine, sure, yeah, it's stuff made out of tyrosine. So catecholamines, that is a sympathoadrenal medullary system, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. So that's catecholamines, and over here, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal system. We're both going to the adrenal gland, but the adrenal cortex, you're going to get cortisol. The adrenal medulla, that's where you're going to get your epinephrine. And epinephrine, you're going to see this vasoconstriction, but cortisol, you're going to stop putting away the reuptake of these things, of your catecholamines. You're going to get that effect a little bit with cortisol, and so you're going to be sort of epinephrined out a little bit if you have a lot of cortisol. And so if you see someone with like Cushing's syndrome, way too much cortisol, just cortisol. I mean, that's Cushing's syndrome. 80% of these people have hypertension, and we're looking at a lot of this interaction between cortisol and epinephrine. But you're going to get depleted immune function, chronic cortisol. You're not Cushing's, but you're edging in on that. And chronic cortisol, depleted immune system. You're going to, I mean, just all of these hormonal problems start to develop. And this is from the same article. So most of the literature agrees that overreaching, overreaching, and overtraining syndrome, OTS, must be viewed on a continuum with a disturbance, an adaptation, and finally a maladaptation of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis and all other hypothalamic axes. And so hypothalamic pituitary liver axis, that's going to be your IGF, your IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor. Hypothalamic pituitary thyroid axis, hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis. So when you start disrupting these axes, when you mess up the hypothalamus, you start disrupting these axes with overtraining. You have a world of problems ahead of you. But mostly what we see is this hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And the hypothalamus, again, it's a brain region, and it's controlling the pituitary. The pituitary is a gland. It's outside of the blood-brain barrier. The hypothalamus behind the blood-brain barrier. It's a part of your brain, the hypothalamus. It's protected behind the blood-brain barrier, which isn't that good of a wall, but outside of that wall, out in the wilds, that is your pituitary. And you go from the hypothalamus to the pituitary, usually the anterior pituitary. This is our axes are coming from the anterior pituitary. There's a couple of hormones that are going to have, their own little effect coming from the posterior pituitary, but all of these axes that we're talking about, anterior pituitary. Now, the axes, right? The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the thyroid, the gonadal, the liver axis. So from the hypothalamus, you get growth hormone releasing hormone. Obviously, that's going to cause the anterior pituitary to release growth hormone. And then the growth hormone goes to the liver. Okay, this is a kidney over here, but the growth hormone goes to the liver and makes it release IGF-1. That's the bulk of your IGF-1. If you disrupt that axis, you have less IGF-1. That is something you can see in overtraining, is disrupted IGF-1, lower IGF-1. IGF-1 is critical for repair and remodeling of your tissues and recovery. And as soon as you start reducing your IGF-1, you're going to be a horrible athlete. You want a bunch of that. Gonadal axis, so gonadotropin releasing hormone, luteinizing hormone for males to testes to get your testosterone go down. The thyroid axis, so you go, thyrotropin releasing hormone, that's from the hypothalamus, to the thyroid stimulating hormone, that's from the pituitary, the thyroid stimulating hormone. So obviously it stimulates the thyroid. You get T4, thyroxine. Triiodothyronine, that's T3. That's actually the more potent one, but most of what you're releasing from your thyroid is going to be T4, thyroxine. Now, you can disrupt all of these things, and your metabolism and your recovery super impaired. But the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the hypothalamus releases corticotropin releasing hormone. Okay, that just makes the anterior pituitary, which is the anterior. This is our axes, right? Anterior pituitary releases adrenocorticotropic hormone. This is often what you see being measured. If somebody's measuring these things, often they're measuring that. Adrenal cortex, cortisol, cortex, steroid hormone. And so this is protein. Growth hormone is a protein hormone. IGF-1, that's also a protein. It's a bunch of amino acids, polypeptide hormone. The gonadal axis, you get to the gonads and the adrenal cortex. That's where your steroid hormones come from, which are not made they're not protein. They're not made from amino acids. They're made from cholesterol. And so cortex, a glucocorticoid from the cortex, it's made from cholesterol. Now, thyroid is fascinating because it actually has these transporters that goes into the cell. So thyroid hormones behave as though they're steroid hormones, despite being amine hormones, protein, polypeptide hormones. Now, the stress response, let's take a coinage from Van Ness, where he says, what does the hypothalamus do? And he says the 6 F's. he says. Some of you have probably heard this before. So all these F's, there's fight and flight. It's like the fight or flight response, or then the fright response, and there's food, and there's fluids, and then there's, let's call it, fornicative activities. So there's a lot of regulation that the hypothalamus is doing. So this is sympathoadrenal medullary. This is epinephrine, right? HPA, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal, that's going to be cortisol. So this one over here, this is a catecholamine, right? It's an amine hormone. It's one amino acid, and it's a hormone. And over here we have cortisol made from, they're both coming from the kidney, from the adrenal gland on top of the kidney, not from the kidney itself, but from the adrenal gland, which is like a little toupee that the kidney wears. But this, it's permitting movement. It's permitting the mobilization of you, right? Because you're stressed. What are you stressed about? The bear, the lion, the danger of some sort, there's a lack of food and you need to do, say there's a chase that you need to do, there's some an enemy coming at you with a club. What is it that you're stressed about? Work. That's your genome has no idea what the hell that is. No idea, right? What are you stressed about? Oh, this social hierarchy in the work setting that's really making me feel bad about myself. Your genome has no idea what is the matter with you and what is the matter with life that has created situations like this. So it gives you a bunch of, or even better, this is really applicable to you. What are you stressed about? Exams, it's like finals week or a thesis, comprehensive exams, whatever it is. Okay, now this is something that lingers and lingers and stresses you out and stresses you out. And can you accomplish it by running really fast and exerting yourself really hard? No. If you do that during comprehensive exams, I'll think you're crazy, right? If you go defend your thesis and as part of your defense, you're squatting as you talk, I'll think you're a lunatic. I won't think you're a lunatic because I'll know what you're doing, but the rest of the world will think you're a lunatic. Not Van Ness. He won't think you're will applaud and be like, yeah, that's what you should be doing. But the rest of the world will think you're a crazy person because that's not how culture exists, right? That's not how society behaves. What do we do when we get really stressed out? You sit down and think. You sit down and type. You sit down and research. That's what we do. You lie down and stew or whatever. You get really stressed out and you sit down. That's the worst thing you can do. That's one of the worst things that your body is capable of doing. Is heroin worse than that? Probably, sure. Yeah, it probably depends on magnitudes. It depends on doses. But one of the worst things you can do is get really stressed out and sit there, because these things, what are they? What is it that they're doing? Well, they are increasing ATP levels and let's go through some lipolysis and glycogenolysis and let's mobilize energy substrates and let's get the heart going, right? Let's get that heart beating and we'll start getting some more air in us and I mean let's mobilize all of these energy substrates and sit there. That's the worst thing that you could possibly do. So this is just a look at the sympathoadrenal medullary system, the medulla or the adrenal medulla and nerve, right? It's acetylcholine based activation here. And so the sympathetic nervous system, norepinephrine is a neurotransmitter, meaning nerve to nerve. Neurotransmitter, nerve is releasing this thing. The adrenal medulla is that's what's releasing your epinephrine. So epinephrine, norepinephrine, pretty much the same thing, right? Now there's a tiny difference, but pretty much the same thing. They bind to slightly different beta adrenergic receptors, or adrenoceptors, beta adrenergic receptors. And the B1s over here, think about your heart and the contractility of your heart. You're increasing cardiac output, you're increasing heart rate, and the strength of that contraction. So let's get that heart beating. You have probably, I would hope, at some point in life, you have felt epinephrine. That thing. Right when that's happening, that's epinephrine in your beta 1s. Beta 3s, there's some lipolysis that's happening there. Beta 2 receptors, this is pretty diverse. Lung stuff is happening. It's not just this by itself. There's a lot of breathing that's going on. The bronchioles, you're gonna have some binding and activity there. Arteries are going to be a bunch of beta 2s. There's glycogenolysis happening there. There's lipolysis happening there. Skeletal muscle activity. So and norepi, epi, you can think of them as functionally sort of doing the same thing. Really overlapping. There's also alpha receptors, the beta, there's also alpha, but think of these things as sort of functionally, you don't need to identify which beta adrenergic receptors they're binding to and what their distinct functions are. You can lump these two together. Just know that norepinephrine is almost all of it is going to be neurotransmitter. And epinephrine, think of this as your hormone. Epinephrine, think of adrenal gland. Norepinephrine, think of nerve. And then they sort of functionally do the same thing. Now, it gets busier. All this stuff gets a lot busier. But the only things you need to really pay attention to here, I mean, you see like thyrotropin releasing factor hormone. Factors are just proteins. Insulin-like growth factor, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. When you see factor, hormone or protein, atrial natriuretic peptide or atrial natriuretic factor, P's and F's and hormones, who cares? So when you see corticotropin releasing factor or corticotropin releasing hormone is going to cause the anterior pituitary to release adrenocorticotropic hormone, which is going to cause the adrenal cortex to release its glucocorticoid, cortisol, right? And then you have we saw that little picture of how this works, the neural pathway of how this works, the sympathoadrenal medullary system, so you get your epinephrine. Now, very basic. Don't write this down or pay too much attention to this, but effort and distress without effort, there's a little bit of a difference. There seems to be on average a little bit of a difference of if it's effort without distress, distress without effort, effort with distress, of which axis is sort of leading the charge. There seems to be a little bit of a difference there. But now let's get back to, I thought we were going to finish early, maybe a couple minutes early, getting back to the idea of Hans Selye and stress. At the beginning of the lecture, I said something like, I'll try to mount a defense for Hans Selye in a very narrow window, a very narrow capacity, based on overtraining syndrome, based on all of you exert yourself and exert yourself and exert yourself, and then you find yourself in functional overreaching, and you're so strong-willed and stubborn of mind and disciplined of body that you keep exerting, and so you find yourself in non-functional overreaching. Now, I mean, like 8 weeks, 6 weeks, I don't know, it's going to take a while to come out of this thing and come back to hopefully where you were before, or just sub that and be able to reach that again without too much stress. And still, you are so strong of will and fortitude that you exert yourself and exert yourself and exert yourself, and now you wind up with hormone problems. Right now you wind up with this thing that might plague you for life, and is certainly going to haunt you, and you just lie around all day and remember the good old days, and I mean that will happen if you find yourself in overtraining. Now this situation, this very narrow window, this very precise situation, we can give a little bit of defense to Hans Selye. And so you remember 1936. He says this, the end of that article. We consider the first stage to be the expression of a general alarm of the organism when suddenly confronted with a critical situation. Therefore, it's termed the general alarm reaction. And then over here we have sympathoadrenal medullary, right? So we're going to get this fight or flight, all those Fs, right? We can get some Fs, and not necessarily in this particular situation, but adrenaline or epinephrine, exact same thing. And over here, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, and we're going to get corticosteroids. What is that? Cortisol in this case, glucocorticoid, and liver releases energy. And so we're mobilizing energy substrates with both of these. Let's mobilize energy substrates and get our resources prepared. You're going to go on a trip, go to the bank and take out a bunch of cash. I'm going to whatever, I'm going down to Tijuana, right? You're going to bring some cash with you. Yeah, you're not going to try to use your card. debit card or your like credit card in Tijuana. That sounds like a terrible idea. So you show up with some cash. And so that's what you're doing here. All right, let's get some money out of the bank. Let's get ready to spend. And unfortunately, if you sit down, that's the problem. You want to actually spend the cash that you pull out. Otherwise, you just deposit it somewhere on your body, and you don't deposit it as nicely as it was in the bank. It's not as organized as it was at Chase or the Bank of America or whatever it is. You're depositing. It's like, no, I have all this money. I'm just going to throw it under the mattress now, and like now you have a bumpy body. So this idea of trying to provide a little bit of general adaptation syndrome, some gassy defense, is you have the alarm stage, right? So we get that corticotropin releasing hormone, adrenocorticotropic hormone, cortisol release, get some growth hormone, some thyroid activity, a bunch of anxiety, all of this stuff. The alarm stage, this is going to happen kind of no matter what the stress is. The resistance stage, Selye talked about, where there's this reduction in the adrenal cortical activity, the sympathetic nervous system is reduced a little bit, so sort of the opposite. And then if you continue and continue and continue in this perpetual alarm stage, right, in the sense that you're overtraining, you're an overtraining, maybe you're an overreaching over here, and then you get into overtraining, and now we start to see these problems manifesting, overtraining syndrome manifesting, that exhaustion stage. And so there's a little bit of room to give Selye some defense. Now, adaptation, or is this a specific or a general adaptation? Well, no, that's not even close to that, right? So let's get back to Edward Adolph. It has been widely supposed, like nudging Selye and Selye's readers, that adaptations to various stressors have much in common. I ask how much? The conclusion will be reached that combinations of modifications differ markedly from one stressor to another. So Selye, there's a little bit of room where we can pat him on the back, on his bones, whatever, he's been dead for a long time. We can pat his exposed scapula and say, you were right about one very narrow thing about the exhaustion piece, about what overtraining looks like. Are we talking about adaptations being general and stuff? No, not even close. The name is stupid. But what we're talking about is there's an acute response, general alarm reaction that happens. We get the sympathoadrenal medullary response, or we get the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal response, or mobilizing energy substrates. Hopefully we consume those energy substrates we mobilized. And then if we just continue to endure and endure and endure and endure and persist and persist and persist and persist, and our determination and fortitude and endurance are put to the test and win, and we keep going, now we get to that exhaustion stage, and that's when we start seeing IGF going down, because the hypothalamic pituitary liver axis, right? We see testosterone going down, that hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis, and we start seeing immune system compromise and all of this endocrine disruption and dysfunction. So, quizzing yourself, we don't need to do this. The quiz yourself slides are in like everything. Yeah, I'll keep having these things there. I added a few more, heart rate response during stress, systolic blood pressure response during stress, redistribution of blood flow during stress, hepatic glucose production during stress. So just a quick answer of these ones: heart rate response during stress. Right, we're going to get an epinephrine response. That epinephrine response, we're going to get some B1, some beta 1s, some of that activity, and we're going to get contractility. We're going to get total cardiac output increasing. Same thing, systolic blood pressure during stress. Now, during chronic stress, again, these things you might see often chronic elevations. Maybe sometimes people will see this going down, but often there's a little bit, especially with heart rate is more sensitive as a signal, as a little flag, just a little pink flag. It's not waving a red flag. It's just like a white sock went through the laundry with something red in it, and it's a little bit pink. It's just a warning sign. Redistribution of blood flow during stress. Okay, so just think redistribution of blood flow during any sort of exertion and activity. You're not actually like, oh, let's send a bunch of blood to this splanchnic thing to help digest, and I'm sitting here after Thanksgiving dinner and all my blood's going to my stomach. That's not happening during stress. Hepatic glucose production, liver glucose production. Let's mobilize energy substrates. Gluconeogenesis. Let's increase our blood sugar. And you can just go exert yourself really hard for 5 minutes. Your blood sugar might go up. All right, so that's the last slide, and we're a couple minutes shy. Do you have any questions before our weekend begins? Gurdeep, your screen no longer says iPhone.
I know. I'm back to on my laptop. I was waiting to talk to you at the end of class last time, but I guess it got disconnected. The call dropped and then I couldn't talk. But I mean I'll just say I had COVID for 2 weeks. So I'm good now.
How long ago is 2 weeks? Like, are you like you've had it for 2 weeks and it was 2 weeks ago and you're dying now, or is it like
I was dying previously?
Okay.
Like my like quarantine period ended already.
Okay.
And I was just really out of it, and I was trying to keep up as much as I could, but I emailed you about it. I don't know if
Okay.
you got it or not, but
I saw there's just so many emails, and so I will read and respond, and
yeah. Take your time, but I kind of just mentioned in there like what's been happening, and if I could get the lecture recordings, because I'm sure like most of it kind of just grazed my head and left, and so I'm just trying to keep up with that. And then I was also wondering if I could set up a time with you so we could go over whether I should do thesis or comps.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So, I mean, whenever you can, I'm pretty available. So you can just send me whatever time works for you and we can do that.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll read through your email and get back to you, and we'll figure out everything. And I'm glad you look healthy.
Yeah, better.
However much it took out of you, you seem to have climbed back out of that pit.
It was the worst part of it for me was the cough. There was a point where it was like 4 a.m. and I was like coughing so bad. I felt like I was hallucinating. Like I was in a whole other like realm. But what really helped me, to be honest, and it kind of took the cough away in 2 days, was they gave me codeine syrup. And that took the cough away like instantly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good.
But I mean I only took 2 doses and it took it away, and I'm not trying to keep taking it and whatnot. And
are you still coughing at all?
Like the slight cough, like I can feel it.
Yeah, the little like itch
right now. Yeah, but it's not like how it was. It was pretty bad. Yeah.
Good. I'm glad that you like look healthy and appear to be recovered.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, because people just get ravaged by this thing.
Yeah. So. I also heard, I was watching this podcast today, kind of off topic, but it was it said that if you get it the second time, it would like destroy your body. Like it gets worse the second time than it does the first.
I haven't heard that, and I don't know enough about it to have any
But
commentary.
they're saying they're doing research on it, but I mean whatever. Like I hope I get vaccinated in the next couple of like months. So
yeah. Okay. I hope everyone gets vaccinated in the next couple of months, and we can sort of put an end to the sort of fear and crisis and death, and
yeah. Alrighty. Thank you so much. I'll just look forward to your email.
Okay. I'll get in touch with you tonight or tomorrow or something.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Anyone else have any good news or bad news or neutral news or questions or?
I did have one question.
Yeah, go for it.
Now I know that the summer catalog isn't coming out for like another month or almost month and a half, but do you have any idea as to what I guess HESP classes will be offered over the summer?
Over the summer?
Yes. Like, because my plan is to do my like second undergrad class over the summer.
Oh, okay.
That way I don't have to tax on another class in the fall.
Yeah, I think I'm doing 147 over the summer, I think.
Okay.
I've never done that before, but well, I don't know. Well, it'll work. And then I think Sharon West has some sort of what is it, like what it's like a long, it's a bunch of words. Whatever. I don't know what they call it. It's, you know, best practices in health and exercise science, or something like that.
Okay.
I think she has one, you know, something like that. And I know Van Ness is probably doing like a nutrition thing or metabolism or something.
Yeah, because I'm in his nutrition and metabolism right now, actually.
Okay. Yeah, you never took my 147, did you?
No, I was Media X undergrad,
Yeah.
so this is
So maybe just do like a 147.
Okay.
It won't be that bad. I don't know, maybe it is. You've never done 129 before.
No.
Okay. I think over the summer I'm going to make it easier. 147, just because like there's a shortage of time. Nobody can cram like that and actually learn anything. So I think I'd probably cut down the total amount of topics that I teach. We'll talk. We'll figure it out. So I'm not sure exactly what's being offered, but I think everyone has one class. I think.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure mine is 147. Van Ness has something. I think Sharon is doing one of those best practice ones, which that may be appropriate for you. The best practice, because that's probably would be the easiest of all of them. Would be my guess.
Okay.
And Peg Chicolella, I'm not sure what she's teaching. It might be like a sport law or some sort of 129, maybe something like that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't have a good answer because I'm not sure. Whatever. All I know is
No,
what I think I'm teaching.
I honestly didn't expect a solid answer. Okay. I just wanted to see if like there's an idea, so I can at least have myself like an idea of what I'm looking for.
Yeah. So there will be classes. There will be HESP undergraduate classes that are 100 and up, because it has to be 100 and up class, and it can't be like HESP 41 or something. It has to be, you know, HESP 1 whatever.
Right.
So there will be stuff. I'm not exactly sure what that stuff is going to be yet, but
okay,
you'll have something to take. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Today, well, just in general, you had some good diagrams today, and I was wondering if like there's a way I can get like access to them.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly the overreaching one I want to look at, and then when you were talking about like the hypothalamus towards the end, is there any way I can get, or we can get, access to that?
Yeah. So I will get the like original sources. It's there's a journal article that the overreaching ones came from. There's two journal articles that I had. One of them was a position stand, and the other one was a Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research. I'll post both of those PDFs of the articles on the page, and then I'll send out the visuals for what were the other ones? What were the other?
You had one on overreaching.
Okay, yeah. So
not overreaching. I'm sorry. Overtraining. You were talking about it towards the end, and then when you were talking about like the hypothalamus, you had a couple diagrams too.
Okay.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I'll figure it out.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll get a bunch of hypothalamic diagrams together and the overreaching, overtraining stuff and pass.
Okay, if it's not a lot, that would be nice to.
Yeah.
Okay. That's my only question. Thanks.
Okay. All right.
I kind of had the same question, if like you're going to plan on posting the slides or not.
There's just so little room to post things, and so I was just going to do the videos. I was just going to post the videos of things. But if there's something in the slides that you want, I can sort of send along that specific stuff.
Yeah, so no worries. I'll just like go through a video and like find. I just had like some information I want to like check on. So yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Or just like your slides that have like what to know, things to know.
Oh yeah, like the review slides of things to know and stuff. Yeah, I could like. I'll do a review, the whole thing, review slides. Because I'm going to have to start deleting as we move forward. There's only a couple more uploads I can do, and then I have to delete as I post and delete as I post. And I mean, I wish Pacific would just up the storage space, so I could upload a semester. But yeah, so I'll try to post the more kind of critical stuff. And articles are really, those are only like 100K or so. Articles are tiny, and so I can upload as many articles as we want. But when it starts getting into like big images and the slideshows that are, 100 megs, it starts to occupy a lot of space.
Yeah, I tend to use just the things to know slides and like your review slides of like, this is what I'm gonna kind of cover. I want you guys to know this specifically, and then you use that as like a checklist, and you go over the information and notes.
Okay, yeah. I'll put together as we go, because I'm going to just keep adding to the things to know. So on Monday there will be 3 or 4 extra things to know slides, and so as we go, that whole section stays intact. It just gets longer and longer, and I spend less and less time with it. Yeah. But I'll when it's getting closer to complete, I'll post that whole thing.
Perfect.
So, anyone else?
I'm good. You guys have a good weekend.
All right, everyone, enjoy your weekending.
Yeah, I'm gonna for Epi. I'm gonna delete the downloaders after they finish their first lab.
Okay.
And then you have a room because those downloaders take up a lot of space.
Okay. Yeah, we're fine for the moment, because as soon as we move into the second section, I'm just going to delete the whole first section and so I'm just doing one section at a time. So I don't think we're going to run out of space on the Epi page. I'm doing their office hour postings on YouTube, just like unlisted little videos and so. Pardon?
Have you been showing up to office hours?
Yeah, there's no. And it's like one person a week, something like that. In 147, every single time people are showing up to office hours because it's physiology, and I think people find it more interesting. In Epi, there was somebody who showed up to the last one and asked some questions. There are 2 people who showed up to the last one and asked questions. There's one person who showed up to the one before and said, "Am I missing anything?" I'm like, nope, you're set. Here's when the test is. And I walked through the syllabus with him for maybe 2 minutes. And then he's like, okay, that's all I needed. And then he left. For 147, I usually spend about half of the time in office hours. And then the other half, I'm just there, but like it's on the side and I'm just working. But yeah, I am getting a lot of the 147 lectures up on YouTube in a way that has a table of contents where you can actually just click on the topics. So I think it'll be much more accessible. By the time 147 gets to the third section, I want to have them all up on YouTube where I can have ample space where I just post links for that. But in the table of contents, it's just little broken up times. And so if they have a question about some particular subject, just click on that link and it'll take you right to that spot in the video. It takes me like a few hours per lecture to get everything squared away, but I'm getting through it.
In the end, because it's going to be kind of carrying on throughout the years.
Yeah. Part of the reason I want to do 147 over the summer is I did a really strong version of mTOR and a really strong version of steroids during 147 last time, because I just took advantage of quarantine. Like, I'm gonna do really good lectures for this just to have these permanent recordings. But at the start of the semester, I didn't really know how to talk to my computer because I minimize all the faces and stuff. And it's just a slide is all I'm looking at, and I don't know what to. So my pacing and sort of my presentation wasn't all that good for the first half of the semester, and then I dialed in the pace for the second half. So I do want to just maybe do a really good job of the first half of the semester over the summer or something, and make isolated videos for those 2. But all right, should we get out of here?
Sounds good. Have a good weekend.
All right, it's good to see everyone. Everyone left.